are accepting a bastard version of science. It says, yeah, things can change, species change. They just, in order to fit into the Bible, they say it happened really, really fast. Okay, so this is something to watch for. The modern creationists really do accept some kind of version of science. They're willing to accept science within very narrow limits, as long as they don't exceed the limits allowed by the Bible. But at the same time, they're also insisting on this absolute strict interpretation of the Bible that they call literal. Again, that doesn't make sense, but they're saying that that's the case. They're saying that Genesis accounts for all the material evidence, which they accomplish by mostly ignoring almost all the evidence and just picking out the bits that they can hammer into that form. They also insist that science, especially evolution, is satanic. That it's a corrupting influence on all of society that must be defeated. Otherwise, your children will be starring in porn movies and slurping down drugs. And that they have their own version of science. It's the only acceptable kind. And that science is reconciled with the book of Genesis. Okay, so that's the scary underbelly. That's what's really out there. This is what most of those creationists that are running around in America believe. And it's much more hardline than anything that was talked about 100 years ago. This is stuff that, if we had a time machine and could bring back a group of fundamentalists from the early 19th century or early 20th century, they would see this and decry this as all heresy and absurdity and dangerous, and then throw it out. But now it's the way to go. Now, one other thing you've probably heard about is intelligent design. And I'm not going to say a lot about intelligent design because intelligent design is bullshit. Intelligent design is basically camouflage thrown over creationism in order to get it past the American courts. There is no other reason for this. This was pretty much firmly settled in the Dover trial a couple of years ago, where they actually did the research and dug into it, discovered all the people who are now pushing intelligent design and pushing creationism before 1987, that they were in the process of writing a book promoting creationism. And then what they did is, on those primitive computers from 1987, they just pulled up the whole document and did a global search and replace and changed creationism into intelligent design. So it's really stealth creationism. When you look at what some of the prominent members of the intelligent design movement say, this is the kind of stuff they're talking about in their conferences. They avoid talking about this in public, but in public to a group like us with a diversity of opinion, but in private conversations, they will say this stuff freely. Philip Johnson is the guy who founded the intelligent design movement. He's a California law professor, so he's a smart guy. He can write well. But what he's saying is here's his justification for intelligent design. We're taking intuition that most people have, the belief in God, and making it a scientific and academic enterprise. We are removing the most important cultural roadblock to accepting the role of God as creator. So whenever anyone tells you that intelligent design is a secular movement, it is not. It is a sneaky way to sneak God in without mentioning him. William Dembski is a fundamentalist Baptist Christian, and in some ways he's even worse than Philip Johnson. What he's saying there, intelligent design is just the logos theology of John's gospel restated in the idiom of information theory. And this is what they do, is they take old theological concepts and they, like the logos theory, and they dress them up with the scientific things like information theory and sort of mash them together poorly and try to make them sound semi-intelligent. What intelligent design is chiefly doing, though, is they're doing the same thing the creationists are doing. Intelligent design creationists are not doing research. They're not doing scientific work to establish any of their principles. Most of what intelligent design creationists do is they attack standard explanations from biology of the transformation of organisms. I'll give you one example here. This is kind of like intelligent design's wrecking ball, comparing it to Ken Ham's wrecking ball in his creation museum, is just constantly belittling research. Any of you who are in biology are probably very familiar with this recent stuff that is coming out of Kingsley's lab in California, looking at stickleback. Sticklebacks are amazing animals. They're wonderful to work with because what you've got is you've got diverse populations all over the world. They have a pattern of isolation and separation from other groups that you can find groups that have been recently isolated, groups that have been isolated long ago, and you can do all kinds of molecular genetics on them. They've got the tools to go to the genome of these animals and ask what makes this particular stickleback that lives in freshwater different from this other stickleback that lives in saltwater. And they can tease apart the genes that are involved in this, and they can work out all these details. This is a comment that Paul Nelson made. Paul Nelson is a fellow of the Discovery Institute. He is an intelligent design creationist. And he and I were both at a conference in Chicago where Kingsley was speaking, and he described his work and just kind of blew me away. It was beautiful stuff. I really recommend it. I'm talking about creation. Creation is boring. Go read the science. Go read David Kingsley's work, and you will just be astounded. It's beautiful, gorgeous work that's actually characterizing the evolution of fishes in recent history, and it's spectacular. What Nelson wrote about it is that, and this was just astounding to me because here we were sitting at the same meeting, and he says, okay, the evolutionary changes that Kingsley illuminate are all losses. They're just breaking things. Okay, that they've had all these changes that have occurred in parallel, they've been documented all over the world. He says, but really interesting macroevolution can't be losses of this and that. He says, you got to build novelty, not jettison it, etc. And he talks to Mike Behe and other creationists, and he says, yeah, it's all breaking things and losing things. This is all that modern evolutionary biology talks about, is losing stuff, which is patently false. And when you read Kingsley's work, what he's looking at changes in regulation, not simple losses. He's looking at these genes that have to be turned off and on in different contexts, and he's finding the regulatory mechanisms that act as switches. Turn one, he's finding the changes that occur in these different populations. And they are not simple deletions. There are point mutations, for instance, to change whether a gene is off or on. So, basically what this is telling you is that in order to make a case, intelligent design creationists are going to lie to you. They're going to misrepresent the research. So, I don't want to overemphasize intelligent design creation because they're wrong and they're also fading. Intelligent design creationism is not the reason most people get into creationism. Like I said, it's camouflage for the regular creationism that you hear described by people like Ken Ham. It's all a facade thrown over it. And after the Dover trial, where the intelligent design creationists were handed a really nasty defeat, they were ridiculed by the judge in ferocious ways because they were dishonestly representing the work. I think it suffered a defeat that it will not recover from. It will be slowly fading away. But there will be another facade erected eventually, don't worry. They're very resourceful. So now I say, what can we do about all this? How can we correct this problem? Because there's all this misinformation being spread. And I'm going to suggest a few simple solutions, and that is more activist outreach. That what we need to do is have more scientists willing to talk to people other than their fellow scientists, willing to get out there and spread the news. When you look at the United States and ask, where do Americans get their news? This is a striking graph. If anybody here works in the newspaper industry, you know that dark line that's going down, that's newspapers. Newspapers are in big trouble. People just aren't reading them anymore. If you look at things like local TV news, you look at nightly network news, those are also all going down. Cable news, the green line, well, it's kind of holding its own, but I think that's entirely Jon Stewart's effort. There's a few
Jon Stewart and Glenn Beck.
Okay. Network morning news, yeah, that's flat.
But he's not on
The
cable.
only thing that's really going up solidly, it's that purple one in there, it's the web. Where do people get their news? They go to the web. If you are a college student or a college professor or somebody in one of those fields, you're probably right there at the leading edge of this whole movement. Most of us, when we get up in the morning, it's no longer a matter of getting the New York Times and reading that over coffee. We all fire up our browsers and we go to the BBC or we go to CNN or we go to something like that. It's, okay, what happened overnight? And we get it very quickly right there. And we can pursue stories even further by the mechanism of the web. If we find something we're interested in, we can read up more on it and we're not at the mercy of a newscaster who's going to read a 3-minute statement every half hour.